If you're watching this on Legacy of Survival, make sure you subscribe so you never miss these deep dive historical breakdowns. What you're about to hear isn't the romanticized cinematic version of World War II. It's the raw, unfiltered side, where ordinary men and women used whatever they could scavenge to defend themselves when formal supply lines collapsed. Historians often focus on generals, armies and strategy, but the real heartbeat of survival in World War II came from small workshops, underground hideouts, farms and resistance cell basements where scrap metal became the only line between staying alive and being overrun. This story of improvisation didn't just show technical creativity. It revealed something far more powerful: the human instinct to adapt under the worst possible conditions. And if you appreciate learning the forgotten realities that shaped survival history, you'll fit right in with the rest of this community. Subscribe, share this video with another history buff, and let's get into the real mechanics of wartime ingenuity. Now, let's talk about how resistance fighters turned pipes into single-shot emergency firearms. One of the most common improvised weapons during World War II was the crude single-shot pipe gun. These weren't battlefield tools, they were last resort devices used by underground cells that needed something, anything, to give them a fighting chance. The design was dangerously simple: two different diameters of metal pipe, one sliding into the other, often reinforced with clamps or welds scavenged from broken farm equipment. Underground groups in Eastern Europe produced thousands of these, though they rarely survived long in combat. For us, the lesson isn't about recreating a weapon. It's about understanding how resistance groups use limited familiarity with machining and basic metallurgy to create functional pressure-bearing containers. Modern historians, reenactors, or survival educators apply this by studying pressure dynamics, metal fatigue, and safe workshop practices when restoring antique equipment or replicating inert museum props. The core takeaway is that even minimal tooling, files, hand drills, and a heat source can transform worthless metal into purposeful equipment, provided safety and legality are fully respected. And yeah, it's worth noting how mechanics converted farm scrap into homemade mortars. In places like Yugoslavia and the Philippines, guerrilla forces converted tractor axles, exhaust tubes, and cast-off steel plates into improvised mortars. The goal wasn't precision. It was shock, noise, and disruption, tools for breaking encirclement or creating a diversion. These mortars operated at extremely low pressures compared to military models, which explains why many didn't survive a dozen firings. For modern researchers or survival educators, the practical application is in understanding low-pressure launching principles. The same engineering logic is used safely today in small-scale educational devices such as pneumatic potato launchers, pressure demonstrators, or blacksmithing forges. By analyzing how guerrillas selected thicker metals for chambers and lighter components for tubes, one can learn material selection fundamentals that translate directly into safer contemporary metalworking projects. And how downed aircraft became a goldmine for improvised blades. Across every front, one resource consistently salvaged was wrecked aircraft aluminum. It was lightweight, easy to shape, and abundant after dogfights or bomber runs. Civilians and resistance fighters hammered engine cowling, propeller sections, and fuselage fragments into knives, machetes, and utility blades. These weren't elegant. They were functional tools for cutting wire, clearing brush, or quietly disabling equipment. Today, the survivalist takeaway is more practical and far safer. Aluminum is one of the most forgiving metals to repurpose. Understanding how WWII era people cold-hammered and filed it teaches modern bushcrafters to turn scrap into repair brackets, stove windshields, and lightweight tool handles. Studying these wartime examples trains the eye to recognize workable metal quickly. And, well, how vehicle leaf springs became the backbone of resistance machetes. Leaf springs from abandoned or destroyed vehicles were especially prized because they were already heat-treated high-carbon steel. Blacksmiths in rural workshops reforged these into heavy chopping blades, trenching tools and defensive edges for partisans in forest regions. This wasn't romantic heroism. It was grueling work done at night in hidden forges. The contemporary application is entirely non-weapon-oriented, but honestly incredibly useful. Leaf springs remain one of the most accessible sources of high-carbon steel for hobby blacksmiths creating farm and workshop tools. Learning how WWII forges treated and tempered springs helps modern makers craft chisels, froes, garden tools and timber wedges with historical authenticity. And, it's fascinating how steel tubing and door springs became improvised traps. Partisans and civilians often relied on mechanical traps not to kill soldiers, but to slow pursuit or protect escape routes. Their scrap metal components included bent rods, saw blades, door hinges, and heavy springs from bombed-out buildings. These devices created noise, confusion, or temporary injury, just enough to buy a few seconds. Modern adaptation avoids anything harmful, but preserves the engineering principle: tension, release, and environmental use. The same mechanics appear in safe wilderness applications like spring-tensioned fishing triggers, camp alarms using cans and cordage, or simple perimeter noisemakers built to alert, never harm. Understanding the WWII versions gives context to how minimal materials can create reliable mechanical reactions. It's really interesting how cookware and kitchen scraps became defensive shields. In besieged communities, metal cookware, pots, lids, baking trays were hammered flat and bolted together to make emergency defensive shields or protective panels for checkpoints. These weren't bulletproof, but they stopped shrapnel and debris, which were far more common threats in urban bombardments. For us today, the lesson is about layered protection principles. Emergency responders, disaster preparedness instructors, and reenactors use these same principles to demonstrate how overlapping plates disperse impact energy. Studying wartime improvisation helps refine modern construction of non-ballistic safety panels for workshops, stoves, and cutting areas. So, just a few closing thoughts. We're two forced ordinary people to become engineers, metalworkers, and innovators overnight. While we never replicate weapons, and never should, the principles behind these creations are historically invaluable. They show how resourcefulness, material knowledge, and improvisation shaped the survival stories of millions. If you want more deep dives into the forgotten side of survival history, make sure you subscribe to Legacy of Survival, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who appreciates serious historical analysis. The more we explore these stories, the more we understand the resilience that shaped the world we live in today.